Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads with my co-host and my co-creator, Mr. Sean Francis. I am Brian Altunian, and today's conversation is going to be another one of these fascinating conversations. We've got our guest is a CEO of well, let me just say this. If you've got anybody in your family that has autism, regardless of age, and you are looking for a way to support that person, whether it's through education or learning, you're looking for resources and tools, this is the conversation you want to be paying attention to. By the way, it transcends autism, and it really the kind of work that the Autism Helper does is going to be beneficial to so many of our families that are helping special needs families in the special needs community. So, without further ado, we're going to jump into it here in just a second in Just Two Dads. Hi, everybody. I am Brian Altunian, along with Sean Francis, and this is another episode of Just Two Dads. Sean, are we at episode number 128?
128.
128. We started this about 2.5 years ago, and we decided that it was a conversation that Sean and I were having as fathers of children in the special needs community, and wondering why, first of all, there weren't more dads having these kinds of conversations, and secondarily, we really thought that the value that we would bring to our community would be shining a spotlight on those amazing warriors who are supporting our community and wanted to create a platform to get the word out. So if you're catching us live on Facebook, welcome. Thank you for being here and being part of this conversation. 128 episodes in, feel like sometimes we're still starting from the very beginning. So please leave us comments. Let us know if there's something that you'd like to ask or comment on the conversation. If you catch us after the fact on our YouTube channel, Just Two Dads, again, hit the like button and subscribe, share with your friends. We can help boost those algorithms and get the word out to more folks. If you're hearing us on podcast outlets everywhere, thank you for listening. I always get surprised when people say, "Hey, I heard your podcast the other day." And I'm like, I didn't see the numbers. That's fantastic. So sometimes we get surprised. Again, if you want to reach out to us after listening to us on our podcast, hit us on we made it really easy, our email account. We are just2dads@gmail.com. And if you're catching us on WSTX AM radio down in the U.S. Virgin Islands, thank you for being part of our family and allowing us to be part of your family. So I think we thank everybody. Sean Du, our producer in Hawaii. Sean Hall, now I'm going to call him Sean Du, is always supportive of everything that we do. So I want to thank Sean ahead of time, and also Billy Footwear, who is one of our sponsors. And thank you, Billy Price. If you don't know about Billy Footwear and the adaptive footwear that they create, they've sold over 1 million pairs. Their story is amazing. Jump onto their website, billyfootwear.com, and see the story about the founder. Also, if you use our link, I think Sean will probably put it in the chat here, use our link and you'll get a discount off any purchases that you make at Billy Footwear. So thank you, Billy, for supporting us, and Sean for keeping us on track. And we're excited about today's guest. So I'm going to introduce Sean, allow Sean to introduce our guest today. So without further ado, Sean Francis, and my friend, you're looking good, buddy. The light works, so you look good. How are you feeling?
Thank you. Hooked it up today. I want to make sure they spend as little time on me as possible, just because, that's not what it's about. I'm blessed, thankful for this platform. And it's just I'm really grateful for us to have this opportunity to connect with so many great people. Usually when we do our show, we will meet with our guest or a prospective guest prior. And we try to limit our conversations, just so you guys know, in making sure that we have a fit. And, we're doing our vetting, they're doing theirs. We talk about as little as possible to make sure that this conversation is as organic as possible. Well, especially for mine, it's going to be super organic because I wasn't available when we had that pre-show call. And so I did not get to meet our guest. And we'll be doing so today for the first time, along with everyone else. And I'm always fascinated by people that serve the special needs community or serve to inspire, generally speaking, and why, and and their path. And it's one thing to start an entity of some kind that might add some level of help to other people. But to turn that into a business that gives you good value for your time and at the same time gives you the rewarding feeling of helping others, our guest today has done that and then some. And so I'm anxious to hear her story and how that all came to be. And that is none other than Mrs. Sasha Long. Welcome, Sasha.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's good to have you. Good to have you.
You know, you're probably thinking, you know, most of the people that we interact with are people that just do what they do, don't see themselves as heroes. But I'm always, you know, comfortable in saying that, you know, it's easy to tell you that that's incorrect. The work that you do is that of a hero, and every hero has superpowers of some kind. And our superpowers come from our origin and how we were raised, where we're from, and everything have everything to do with how we deal with the challenges that show up in life, whether they're a diagnosis of our own or that of someone that we love. But tell us a little bit about that so we can start from the very beginning and how you came to be, where and who you are.
That's very sweet. Thank you. You're right. I definitely do not think of myself as a hero, especially when, you know, I spend a lot of my day working with teachers and parents and administrators that, you know, those I'm like, oh my God, you are the hero. So it's hard to self-identify that way sometimes, but thank you.
I just one thing I just wanted to say, sorry to cut you off, just because of, as we're doing, you know, we do the show live and then it's available on podcast outlets, you know, elsewhere. And as we do the show today on March 22nd, 2023, here in Los Angeles, when you talk about unsung heroes, I just want to make sure that we recognize the students and the teachers, as well as all the employees of the Los Angeles Unified School District, the second largest district in the country, which is now shut down on day 2 of a strike because they're fighting for a livable wage. Teachers are the most unsung of everything we do. And that's also why the work that you do is very much appreciated. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's a great point to bring up. And, you know, I used to work for Chicago Public Schools, which has seen many fair share of strikes. And I've worked through several strikes, and it is such a hard position to be in, no matter what role you are in, whether you're the parent that now your kid is at home, you're the kid, you're the teacher, you know, striking. And it's so hard. So my heart really goes out to everyone there right now because, you know, I think back, one of the strikes that I taught through, I think was 16 days. It was really long. And I, every single morning, had to call 3 of my students so they could hear from me. Not their parents were like, they can't hear from me. They got to hear from you. Like, no more school today. Maybe we'll have school tomorrow. And like, so upset. Why aren't we having school today? Are we going to have school tomorrow? And it like broke my heart to like, I don't know when we're having school. And it's such a hard position to bring in. So hopefully everyone can resolve that quickly.
Yeah, thank you.
Much appreciated. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Almost 500,000 students left.
It's hard.
Week. Yeah.
And you think about too, and that's like totally off on this segue, but you know, I think back to that time a lot. And I had one student who was in my classroom who was severe and profound diagnosis, you know, 14-year-old self-injury, needed full toileting. And, you know, they're like, oh, just drop kids off at some of these schools for basically babysitting. I'm like, he can't get dropped off there. Like, how unsafe of a situation would that be? Single mom, working 2 jobs. And I'm like, you know, I'll come to your house. I'll come to your house and hang with him because he knew me. Like, who else was he going to know that he would feel safe with? So some of these kids are in, you know, such extreme situations with where they can go during the day when this is happening. So when it's that extended period, it's so
perspective is everything. And this is kind of what we were talking about when we said beforehand that this is so free flowing that we just go in multiple directions, but it's very of the moment and very important. And, you know, as conscious as I try to be, I have a book here called Handbook to Higher Consciousness that my dad turned me on to when I was a kid, which I'm rereading. So I'm someone that tries to be conscious as much as I do. You can fall asleep paying attention to just yourself and your own situation. Our kids go to school in a different district, and so they're on spring break. And so the problems, at least on the surface, or for the immediate, that the LA Unified the School District and its children face don't affect us, not right now, but everything that affects one affects everybody else. So it's easy to kind of take that for granted, especially from a special needs standpoint. You're thinking like, wait a minute, I've gotten to a point where, if you're lucky, you have some administrators and teachers that you trust to parent your child while you're at work or whatever it is that you do with your day, and that's gone and taken away. And that's huge. But that also goes back around to the value in the work that you do. But before we get to the work that you do, let's go ahead and get to the beginning of it all.
I'll just make one last comment, because today's strike is about, in addition to, it's not the teachers, by the way, it's special needs aid. It's service. It's all the service workers, and the teachers have just chosen to honor the strike. So the service workers, who in many cases, there's an article out the other day, making $1.25 over minimum wage, and they've, after 16 years with the district. So these are the
why we're short-staffed. Yeah,
exactly, and that's the other issue, right? So after the pandemic, and people were deciding what they wanted to do with their future, it's tough to keep staff on board. We're talking about, and we have a friend who's in the same school as my son, and she has been through probably 6 aides. Her daughter has 6 aides this year alone, and it's her first year in high school. And so it's a challenge keeping those folks, on board as it is, and barely paying them a minimum wage. Yeah. So just wanted to say that our heart goes to those.
We're talking like unsung heroes, like those paraprofessionals and like the bus aides. Like, oh my God, the bus aides make no money. And like, what a hard job to be like on a bus with like 16 kids. And I mean, I keep joking in sessions, like, oh, if your new paraprofessional worked at Target a week ago because your principal grabbed them off the Target floor, but that's probably true. But also, I'd probably rather work at Target. Like, this is a hard job, like to do what you have to do in the role of a paraprofessional. If for like the same amount of money, you could be working at a Target, like, of course we have like a ridiculous job shortage. And, it's now like, I mean, so many students and districts are out of compliance with their IEPs because they just don't have the staffing. And
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So all that to say, the work that you do is amazing, which we're going to get into, but let's finish the original conversation, which is
yes.
Start your beginning.
Okay, so I'm from Chicago. I'm the oldest of 4 from a big Irish Catholic family. My dad's one of 12, so I have like 1,000 cousins that are around all the time. I entered college wanting to maybe do social work. I was kind of between social work and special ed. I had in high school, the last 2 years of high school, had worked in a preschool, and a Head Start preschool that had a little girl with Down syndrome, and I loved working with her. And so I was like, maybe I do want to do special ed. And I also had kind of the idea of social work in my head. My grandma was a social worker, and 2 of my aunts are social workers. My grandma actually, after having her 12th child, went back to school to get her master's in social work, even though she didn't drive. My grandpa had a driver. Like crazy. She also went with my aunt. They went together to get their master's in social work. She started a nonprofit for young girls on the west side of Chicago. My other aunt started a follow-up nonprofit. She started Project Hope and Hope Junior that works with pregnant teen girls. And so they started that. So that's kind of always been a part of our life, is like being a humanitarian. And I always kind of looked up to my grandma and my aunts and the work that they did. So I was like, maybe I'll do social work. Maybe I'll do special ed. And I was like, as like my kind of, 18-year-old self was like, my mom's like, if you go to social work, you got to get a master's. And I was like, I don't want a master's. I'm not going to do social work. Screw that. So even though I got my master's, so I decided to go into special ed. And I was kind of, it wasn't even that people like hem and haw over their major. I didn't do that. I was just like, yeah, if I don't like it, I'll switch. I don't know. And luckily in the program I was in, you had to do quite a bit of like practicum hours from right away. So I started working in special recreation, which I really loved. And special recreation is such a great place there. I worked with a really great camp district in the suburbs of Chicago that had their own camps, but they also had like inclusion aids for all of the other campsites. And I loved that because you got to kind of really have these great experiences with kids, but like in a fun setting, like you're in day camp or going to the pool or playing games. So that was a lot of fun. And my first teaching job, I interviewed for a ton of teaching jobs after I graduated. And the main thing I really wanted was to not be the only special ed teacher in the school. Like I knew enough to know I needed like some community, even though it would probably be small. because there's not always a lot of special ed teachers in a school. And I was really, really lucky where I landed up. I landed up in a school that had 4 self-contained autism classrooms, and I was kind of opening the 4th one. And I had junior high students, and they were all bigger than me. I'm 5 feet tall. They were all boys, my first class, all like way bigger than me. And they're probably like, who is this little girl? What does she think she's going to do? But I loved it. And my principal was a new principal, and he gave me a lot of space, and he let me like figure things out, which I think if I had had a different principal, who knows where my life would have gone, because
Right.
I got just time. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, say all the time, I had no idea what I was doing. You're wildly unprepared with a special ed undergrad degree because you're qualified to teach preschool through high school, self-contained through inclusion, like, and everything in between. And it's just, you can't be enough prepared for whatever role you're in.
Right.
So I had like a lot of trial and error, and was really close with one of the other teachers who was also new, and we just got to try a lot. And that was great. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into, and all my students had autism, and it wasn't an autism classroom. That was just kind of how it worked out and kind of how it stayed for a while. So yeah, that's kind of how I got originally into special ed.
And nobody in your family had dealt with special needs issues
No,
at all?
no, it's just kind of like, yeah, I think like social work was always on the horizon. And then I had like such a nice experience volunteering when I was working at Head Start preschool. And then I was like, maybe special ed. And the more I did in special recreation, was like, oh yeah, I think I'll like this. So yeah.
Interesting. And we're always fascinated, a lot of times we'll talk to folks who have a child or a sibling or somebody in their family that, that has some issue, and the individuals take it upon themselves to see that there's a lack of resources in that area, and then say, I'm going to start an organization that provides this because we needed this as a family when we were getting started.
Mm-hmm.
And so we find that to be so admirable. You take your situation, potential adversity, and then you turn it into something that could benefit the organization or benefit the community. But then more importantly, we're fascinated by people who don't have that personal experience and still dedicate themselves, like you, dedicate themselves to supporting this community. So being around children on the autism spectrum, as an educator, how long did you do that? And then how was that evolution of learning for you?
Yeah, so I was in the classroom 10 years. Throughout those 10 years, I think I went back to school, I don't know, probably 4 years into teaching. I was like, oh shoot, I do want to get my master's, dang it. So I went to get my master's in applied behavior analysis, because I was really looking, I had some really strong behavioral needs in my class. And I mean, advice that I got from mentor teachers, from other consultants, was like, not good, to put it nicely, and like borderline abusive, to put it like not nicely. So, things I was told to do, I was like, whoa, I'm young, but I definitely know I shouldn't be doing that. So,
what kind of things, if you don't mind sharing?
Oh my God.
If you do mind, it's okay. You don't have to tell us.
Yeah,
but if
no,
you're willing
just
that'd be great.
To like yell and wait it out, or like, oh, if you take off your shoe and shake it, I'm like pretending I'm gonna hit them. Like what? Wild things. And like,
so they're like, you can't, you can't put your hands on them, but you can
like,
you can with the notion that you would. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, I just don't think. And also, like, I was like, first of all, it's not right. Second of all, that's like, first of all, just frankly not going to work. Like like I said, these kids are all like bigger than me. I'd be like, yeah, who's this kid? Like trying to intimidate me. And I was like, that wasn't the relationship I had with any of my students at that point. So this was at a point in teaching, this is pre-Pinterest, pre-blogs, pre-Instagram. I was always like literally starving for ideas. Like I had no like role models in my school, because there aren't that many special ed classrooms. Like I would ask like, hey, can you let me go to other schools and look at their classrooms? Like I was just like, I felt like I was lost all the time. Like, am I doing it right? Like, I don't know. Like, I had 5th through 8th graders who were all working, at probably a pre-K through 3rd grade level. I again, like you're just not prepared enough for any specific role within special ed. So I was always like so hungry for ideas of what to do. And then when it came to extreme behaviors, it was like, okay, now this is like super important. Like people are at risk of getting hurt. Like we have extreme behaviors going on. And that led me to ABA, to applied behavior analysis. So I started doing classes part-time while I was still teaching, which was hard but great because I could go to class at night and learn about all these strategies that totally made sense, and then come back the next day and be like, oh, this is it in action. I see it. So that was really cool. I got to do my practicum hours, which when you become a BCBA, you have to do this big set of practicum hours. And I got to do them in my classroom, which was really great because I got to like use my own students in my thesis. I got to like all these strategies I was using really see in action and utilize with the kids in my class. And I had such a wide range of needs that I felt like I had a wide range of experience then. And I think, you know, some of the struggles that the ABA field is kind of going through is it's so clinic and in-home based. And I think most people I was going to grad school with, a lot of professors that I was working with, everything was like clinic in-home based. And that like so little of that applies to a school. Like a school is just like a different beast. Like logistics rule the world. It's like, yeah, another aide would be great there. But like, yeah, right. We don't have that. Like the staffing's so different. Everything's just, the contingencies are different in schools. And I'm always like grateful that I feel like I'm a teacher first and a BCBA second, because that gives me a unique perspective. And I was recently talking to another, you know, teacher than BCBA, and she's like, I just think you can tell when BCBAs have worked in a school or not, because they just, there's things you just don't get about schools. So became a BCBA while I was in the classroom. And then once I was done, I was like, well, I'm used to basically like working 2 jobs, getting my master's and teaching. What else can I do? And I kind of had this idea to start a blog. And so I started a blog. I started kind of selling some of my resources online through a marketplace. Someone had told me about it. And I was like, all right, I could do this. And it really just started as this little like side hustle. Like I wanted to share pictures of my class. A lot of times like consultants would come in my class and take a bunch of pictures, which I was like happy to share. But I always was kind of like, can you give me credit that those are my ideas? Like, I don't know. I'm the one that made that all. So I liked the idea of like sharing, but also like I wanted credit. I don't know. And I just started like taking pictures. I started blogging 7 days a week for some reason. I like dove all in and made my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, like come to school after I was done and like videotape me on a digital camera, giving a tour of my class and like all this kind of stuff. And I loved doing that. I loved, so I just felt like kind of a side thing. And, you know, and that was the start of the Autism Helper about 10.5 years ago. And it grew really organically. Like I never had this like plan in like 5 years, this is what it'll be, 10 years, this is what it'll be. It just started like snowballing. People were like, hey, could you do professional development workshops or speak at this conference? And I was like, sure. And schools in Chicago were like, could you consult after school? I was like, sure. So after a little bit of that, I had to kind of step back from teaching because I just was losing my mind doing 2 jobs at once. There was a point where I was telling this to my sister recently. I left work, went to another school, was consulting there. I was leaving that school, and it was like on a busy street in Chicago, and I couldn't find my car keys. And I was like, God, where are my car keys? Did I leave it in there? And I didn't. Not only was it in my car was running the whole 2 hour. Because I was just like, oh, good thing no one stole my car. Like,
you're lucky your car really wasn't running. Yeah.
Right. I was like, oh, okay. So this is a sign I'm doing too much.
But that answers the question we always ask, like, where's the fork in the road? And obviously that's it.
It was like, yeah, that was it. So, and that was actually, and then yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so you got this fork in the road, you get, you know, and you get, that's some serious divine intervention, because it happens and the car is still there. You're like, okay, so it's a gentle slap, if you will, but it's one thing to be, and you know, want everybody to hear this, is one thing to be, you know, at a fork in the road where, okay, I got to figure out which direction I'm going to go in, because my passion and my vocation are not exactly intersecting. There's a battle that's taking place there. It's one thing to realize, you know, okay, maybe it does make sense to make my passion now my vocation by creating my destiny, starting a business. I'm going to add value to people, you know, on my terms, my time, and get rewarded by more than just dollars. It's another thing to then turn around and do it, because you didn't go to business school or anything. That's not what your practice, that's not what your education was in. And that shouldn't stop anybody. So tell us about the first steps actually going down the road that you're on now.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I had panicked moments of being like, should I go get an MBA? And my husband's like, no, don't go get an MBA. What are you thinking? Like, yeah, like, I mean, that wasn't it. And it felt, you know, in some ways, not like the quote unquote safe choice either. Like, cause teaching, you know, you have a pension and you have this,
For sure.
you know, regular salary and you have really good insurance. And, you know, that's very different when you're self-employed. So in some ways that was like a hard moment, but it also really felt like the right choice because I wanted to affect change at a bigger scale. And as much as like I knew I would miss like my students, there's a lot of things about working in a school, of course, I don't miss that are not so great. But I knew if I wanted to continue affecting change at a bigger scale and, you know, talking with teachers from around the world and creating resources that are used by students from around the world, I couldn't do both. So it was bittersweet, but for sure the right choice at that time. And if I would have waited longer, it would have made it even harder too.
So let's talk about your organization. So your organization is called the Autism Helper. We put the link up there on the screen for people to see. So talk about the evolution of that and what you decided to do, where your focus is, what resources they get in coming to see you and all of that.
Yeah. So our goal is really to support any teachers, clinicians, or parents who are working with kids with autism and really at this point, any struggling learner. And I've kind of been like reframing that a lot recently, especially with a lot of the content we've made over the last few years. Really any student that is struggling to meet classroom expectations. We made a course on executive functions, and that's a course for sure that I'm really passionate about bringing to students beyond just that autism diagnosis. So in some ways, I'm like, that autism name is like limiting because these strategies can work for so many different types of learners. So really any, you know, students with autism or any students that are struggling within their classroom setting. So we provide resources and training as well as curriculum and educational activities. So when we started, it was mostly, we were creating educational activities. I was doing live trainings like conferences and workshops and things like that. And we started a podcast somewhere in there as well. And then it kind of started, I kept being like, oh, these are all the things. We have all the things. We have blog, podcast, we're done. And like, my husband's like the ideas person because he's like in sales and he's always like, well, there's going to be more. And I'm like, there's not more. We've done all of them. We're done. And there always is more. Now I've like come to terms with that. But we started a professional development membership, I think about 4 years ago now, which has been really great. That the membership provides ongoing training and resources and consultation. The idea is like every month there's new little training videos you get and kind of creates this path for the school year. Like this is what you should be focusing on when. We started doing online courses. So we're about to release our 4th online course, which we're really excited about. Our first one was on behavior, which launched literally the month of COVID, which was wild. Now thinking back to all of that.
Yeah.
I was actually like super pregnant, had no childcare, and we had to finish recording this course. So we would wake up, my husband and I would wake up at like 4 a.m. and record before my other kids woke up. So we have one course on behavior change, one on literacy, one on executive functions, and our newest one is on data. And I love these online courses because, you know, in reality, no one has time to sit on like a 6-hour Zoom. And I also think it's like not the best. Like it's fun when I get to do a full day session with schools and conferences and stuff, but it's not like the best way to learn either. Like you don't take in everything when you're sitting there for 6 hours. So I love the courses because you can kind of take it at your own pace. The videos are all like 5 to 10 minutes. We really wanted things that could like fit into a busy teacher's life. So yeah. And then as far as we really kind of upped our ante with the resources component too, which we're really excited about. So we started probably like 5 or 6 years ago, I started creating like my dream curriculum basically. Cause I always made everything for my class, but it was like piecemeal, like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And I was like, well, if I could have like my dream curriculum, what would that look like? And so I started making it. And now we have 8 subjects of it. It goes about 6 different levels in each subject. Last year, we created an option for school districts to purchase directly from us on a subscription-based model that kind of gives access to everything.
Excellent.
And that's been super, super exciting because we want to take school districts' money, not teachers. And we want administrators to be supporting their teachers. So we've loved that and growing that and building out new subjects for it and really bringing what teachers need to their classrooms.
That's amazing.
We started this show because we're like, the conversations that we have, we don't know if men usually take the time to reveal themselves and blah, 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 and talk about emotions and stuff like that. And there's an aspect of it. So people talk about, it's great that you see dads doing that. What we've come to realize is that special needs just happens to be the vehicle. At the end of the day, we're about making the world, the space, the minutes, better. And so from a standpoint of just personal development, so to speak, tell us a little bit about, and I try not to do 2 questions at once, but let's talk about, we talked about the fork in the road and when you decided to go down the one that you're on now. But again, talk in a little more detail about, because when you decide, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go into business for myself. You didn't know how to do that. So tell us about actually doing that, the steps you took, the fear, whatever have you, how many employees you have now and things of that sort, because you're talking about your dream curriculum. Before you do that, you're like, what's my dream business? What's my dream day? What do I want my ideal life to look like? Most of us just live our lives based on reaction and not planning, but you obviously worked your way around that.
Yeah, I think I was in a lot of ways lucky that when I did decide to leave teaching, we already were generating enough revenue that it felt in that way safe because we were selling our resources on the marketplace. I think walking away without that would have been a way different story because I'm not a risk taker. So my husband works for our business as well, as I've kind of said, and he's in sales. So he's always like that. He's the risk taker. I'm not. I'm like, no. Mm-hmm. Like I like this comfortable plan. So he definitely encouraged me on that and helped me feel like more secure with that. That felt like an okay transition. Like we got ourselves to a point like, okay, hard points were, we had to like then learn, okay, how do we get insurance? We were already incorporated at that point, but like, how do we manage our day? When there's, I've worked a lot on like productivity and like, planning my ideal week, planning my ideal day, because, my husband and I are polar opposites in like how we work. Like I could sit on my computer from sun up to sundown and never eat or drink or take a bathroom break and be just fine. And like, that's also not super healthy. So like, I've had to really, and that was okay. Maybe before I have kids, we have 3 young kids now. I can't do that. So really setting boundaries, and I've gotten much better at that. I have like really clear start and stop times with work. When I did travel a lot, I had really clear, like I will do this many dates, which was probably too many, but like I'll do 25 dates and that's it. And then saying no to things. And I have a hard time saying no to things because I genuinely want to do it all. So it's,
so much. I was just going to say, there's so much value in that. So for anybody out there that, obviously, that is thinking of, getting purpose to profit and starting something for themselves. And, you would first of all say, if you can create something that brings something in, that begins to trickle initially and makes that step into the unknown a little more secure or closer to it, then you do that. Second, it sounds like, you've also said that, and I value this so much because I'll be honest, I completely struggle with it, which is, here's my day and it's planned, because I am easily distracted and I get comfortable easily as well. And it's easy to plan your day when someone is giving you, benefits and a paycheck and hours and everything. And they're saying, to get this, here are the hours that you're going to work. Even if they tell you, you take a break when you want or whatever, your day is planned for you. So there's so much value in that. And I think that's completely commendable. So at this point, how many employees do you guys have? Go ahead, Brian.
I'm going to say one thing. As somebody who has an MBA, I would say the fact that you've defined your curriculum and that you've created a marketable and saleable product is exactly the route to take. And, I always think when I started a business and I have started many, the idea of you can offer your services and that's of value, but then your company ends when you decide to stop offering services. If you have something of value and you can box it or write a book or create a curriculum or something that's saleable, a product, it will transcend you. And then so you decide you want to take a year off, right? You can still be generating revenue. So for somebody who I did pursue an MBA and my husband said not to, by the way, Matthew, he's
yeah.
The fact that you guys have created a curriculum and something to sell and something to offer really is a really good path. So I always tell people when they're thinking about starting a business is if you can short of cloning yourself, which is step one, right? If you can clone or box your service or what you're offering, there's a tremendous amount of value here. So I just commend you on that.
He was kind of always the bug in my ear on scalability, because I still do love presenting, and I do COVID silver lining is now I can do most of it virtually. Schools would have never ever dreamed of doing a Zoom presentation 4 years ago. Now they're like, Zoom, no problem. And it's great because I can do way more. But he's never my husband never loved the travel. Not that he was oh, I don't want you to travel. But he's this isn't scalable. There's only one of you. Online courses, it's different. Membership, it's different. Curriculum, it's different. Digital downloads. I mean, I sell things today that I made 9 years ago.
Beautiful.
So anything that has that passive revenue is always something we're kind of oh yeah, let's do that.
Brilliant.
So yeah.
From business advisors and business consultants, we're fans of that model. That makes a lot of, and you're adding value, and you can always update your offerings. You can always update the service, so it's not getting stale on the shelf. You're constantly upgrading.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. So how big is your organization now? Now that you guys started, you started this long ago.
So 10 and a half years ago. Yeah. So this summer will be 11 years. And hired our first employee 4 years ago. And now we have 7 employees. We're hiring another one pretty soon. That I think was almost in some ways a harder jump than just doing this full time, because it's
you
oh,
have to trust.
Oh my God, I don't I the non-great part of me as a business owner is I don't love being involved in the numbers all the time, because they stress me out. I'm don't show me what our payroll is. Don't show me, because that feels like a lot of pressure. But that's been honestly a game changer in where we've been able to go in the last few years, of course, because, our curriculum subscription that we offer to schools, we have one full person that does that. She does live demos with administrators. She's following up. She's doing her invoices. She does all of that. I mean, there's no way I could, while creating content. So we've been super lucky with who's been part of our team. It's been a lot of people that we've worked with as independent contractors that have transitioned to full-time people. I've hired a lot of people I used to work with, one of my best friends who I used to teach with at my first job now runs our school accounts. So, we've been really lucky there on building really a great team that can kind of put all these crazy ideas that we have into action.
Beautiful. We have an idea that we want to talk to you about after the show ends today. So we'll just talk for a few minutes afterwards. So something that might be helpful for you. So that's fantastic. And so I know there's behavioral issues that some of your curriculum deals with. Dream of, your sort of your path. Where's the next growth area for you, or what's your dream trajectory? I think we froze there for a second.
For a minute it was just the video, but I think she may not actually be there, so to speak.
So this is what we do. We freeze people, Sean.
Yeah, this is what happens when you go live. Sasha, if you can hear us, what you might want to do is leave and then come back in. Hopefully you can hear. If you can't, that doesn't my suggestion is of no value whatsoever. But I think it's worthwhile recapping what she said. I'm still just blown away by the choices that she's made in a window like that, because you asked the exact questions I was going to ask, which is, okay, so wait a minute, when did you incorporate that? When did you get started? Because without having experience to know to take those paths and steps, and the most common one is just productivity.
Sure.
When you decide you're going to start a business of some kind, the easiest thing is that, well, I work for myself, so I'll make my own schedule, which can be a detriment or a challenge.
Right. She's coming back. All right. She's coming back here. Whether she
Sorry
is.
about that. Yeah, I don't
Right.
know what that was.
If you're in Chicago,
That's technology.
Things freeze in Chicago.
The joys of
by the way,
technology.
Exactly. There's a great clip today from an Australian broadcaster, and she was communicating with somebody. I don't know if you saw it. And he was on Zoom, and his background was like of his kid's birthday party, and he was trying to change his background, and then it was like of him diving in the ocean, and he kept going, "Hold on a minute," like live on TV, and he finally got it, and then he had a pizza hat on his head. Like, it's hilarious. So anything can happen. We don't. Yeah, so it's all good. We've just been talking about you since you jumped off and came back. All good. So I was asking you your trajectory, like where's the growth path? Have you heard that?
What's the future hold?
Yeah, I'd love, so this curriculum, we call our curriculum subscription is called Curriculum Access. And we really only I think are in the first iteration of it. We started that about, I don't know, a year and a half ago. Yeah, we're now coming to our second year, probably this August. And it's grown very organically. We have a lot of teachers asking their administrators for it, which I love that. Like, I want it to be what the teacher wants. And we're getting some bigger districts, some bigger groups. I think there's just so much untapped potential there, because there's so many kids and teachers that need this in their classroom. So I'm the most excited about that, because it's awesome to hear from, a district that 30 teachers in their district are using this, and they can now, they can have like vertical planning and plan with the junior high teacher. And I was talking to a teacher actually that's in Panama that's using it in her school. And she's like,
That's
oh,
fantastic.
I can, which is so cool, right? Like, and she's like, yeah, and she's the inclusion specialist. And she's like, I can log on, I can find the right thing and print it and be using it seconds later. And that really was like our goal. I think with other, kind of competitors, it's very overwhelming. And I know how busy a teacher is. Like, I don't want you to log in somewhere and be like, oh my gosh, there's too much, I don't know where to start. I want there to be like a clear path of, here's where you start. And I want it to be minutes before the assessment's printed. I want a super quick assessment. And then I want that kid starting on the activity. So, and I think we've accomplished that, but we have like a lot, like we want it to be digital and we want it to be like truly interactive. And those are, that's like another big scary decision of investing in that. But so I think that's going to be our big focus in the next few years, is really building it out to everything it can be.
Looking through your site, it's so easy to navigate. You've made it very simple. It's their courses are listed there. Obviously, if people want to have you speak at their function, what's included in all the courses. So for a teacher who is seeking some support, some resources, I think what you've done is amazing and simple. And I think that probably is something that teachers who are already overwhelmed are looking to access. So that's amazing. And talk about your family for a second. I know you said you had 3 kids. How old are your kids?
Yeah, my kids are 7, 5, and 2.
Interesting. And we're always Sean and I talk about this a lot. When you've got family members who are neurotypical, along with family members who are in the special needs community, it's interesting to see how siblings learn things like tolerance and empathy and acceptance, and in the work that you're doing. And maybe the children are a little young for this, but are you like, do you guys, is there talk of that kind of thing, inclusion, empathy,
especially with like my older daughter, and I think as my other kids get older, what do you do, mom, and what are you doing today? And so we've talked a lot about what autism is and what type of teacher I was, and I still see a lot of my former students. We do like an annual trip at this nature camp, and now they're all like huge with beards and they're like men, and I can't believe how old they are. But so she's like met a lot of them, and I have like pictures of her as like a baby with like my students, former students holding her and stuff, which was great. So, but she, is always like, oh, well, like he doesn't talk, or he talks differently. And so I want to have those conversations early. So it's really a part of like, this is, it's just how different people learn and how different people, think, and how we kind of communicate with the world. So I think it's so important, even if you don't have that opportunity to have, a direct family member that has unique learning needs, like talk about that right away. And that exposure is so needed.
The reality is, even with neurotypical families, we have different learning capabilities.
Oh,
I might learn completely different than my brothers, and
exactly.
We all have
Mm-hmm.
different needs. So that's amazing, and I love. We have talked a lot. We've had a lot of folks on our podcast lately that have been part of what feels like an inclusion initiative. It feels like that we've hit that sort of that mass level, the mass acceptance of need for inclusion in our schools started as a good starting place, and eventually in the workforce and in general, in society in general. And so this idea of inclusion is fantastic. Go ahead, Shauna, you're going to ask something.
No, actually more of an observation, to kind of echo what you were saying in terms of the inclusion. It's kind of weird. It's almost like everything else, before a cell phone, some of us are, we have nostalgic, thoughts of, days in the past and that kind of thing. You could relive this moment.
He means old people,
right? It's not even that anymore. I find that some people are looking to go back like 10 years. For a minute, for a while, it was that. But when you think of going back to the past, you think of like, wait a minute, but wait a second. I wouldn't have a cell phone though. I wouldn't have the internet, and you with like any innovation, it's kind of like, how do we ever live without it? And I think about it when I was a kid in the 70s, like so removed from special needs. First of all, the use of the R word was not just something that was said to be mean. It was just, you didn't know any better. There wasn't anything else. And when you think of the path of inclusion that we're heading towards now, you're like, wait a minute, how do we ever exist at a time when that didn't take place? And it says something about consciousness and evolution. It's related, but a whole separate thing. I've been looking at a lot of things related to like American history, Black history, and slavery and things like that too. And like anything, it's like, no, for a certain amount of time, there are a lot of things that were quote unquote okay. You know what I mean? So when you think of the notion of the inclusion that's needed right now, I was like, wait a minute, how do we go this long with exclusion being all right?
Yeah. And even beyond exclusion, I mean, it wasn't honestly that long ago that it was just like, you were just in a mental institution, I mean, that wasn't that long ago that was part of just like protocol. And like, my dad asked me like, oh, like these numbers in autism, like, why is it so high? It's like, yes, the numbers are increasing, but also like he's like, I don't remember kids with autism being in my school. I'm like, yeah, because they were probably in a mental institution, like that's just what was done, which is wild to think of, that like not only they're not a member of our like school or community, like they're not even a member of their own family and household now. Like, I mean, you can't even imagine, right? So it is crazy to think about.
Well, people like you and your husband and your amazing team are building tools and resources to support this effort of inclusion. And, we definitely salute you. We're glad to have you in our world and in our circle. And the fact that, that you're supporting the community that we are members of, all of us fairly reluctantly, I think, members by association or by inclusion, but thankfully you're out there and you're doing great work. So, and in fact, my daughter Jo, who just logged in and said hello. My daughter Jo is a teacher in the New York area, and doing substitution work right now, but does a lot with special needs. And she was a special needs student herself, all growing up through school. And so, love the fact that you're doing things that would support teachers. So, Jordan, you're just signing on, but you would you get a lot of support off what Sasha and her team are doing. So Sean, we're
Yeah.
at that stage. You want to kind of get us to that?
Yeah, I'm gonna go right into it, but I wanted to say one thing. Brian was mentioning like old age is relative. Brian and I are, I think, a
Close.
year apart, maybe a little less than a year, right? So
Yeah.
I'll be 59 in September. Brian
60 in
59
December.
now, right? See, in 60 in December. So when you get to us, I think generally speaking, when you get to a certain age, but then on top of it with social media, it gets difficult to determine whether or not people are dying sooner or whatever the case is. Either way, I don't think you have to be of a certain age to contemplate your own existence, the fragility of life. And we talked about, being nostalgic, and longing for quote unquote the good old days and that kind of thing. I just want to say that, because we've come so far in so many ways, but have so far to go in terms of just human beings being good and kind to each other. And the work that you're doing, you're one of those people who the work that you're doing gives you a reason to go, it's not just the internet and all these modern things that make it a good time to be alive. One of the best reasons to be able to say, no, this is a great time to be alive is because you meet people that give you reason to think that, because you don't have to look that hard to get cut off in traffic or have somebody flip you off or get rude service from someone and go, man, what is becoming of people these days? Oh my gosh, I've lost my faith in humanity. People don't even say that. What they do is just they give the same negative energy back, F you too. And, but so to have someone whose work lets you know that this is a great time to be alive, that is who you are. And so we thank you for that so very much.
That means a lot.
We are at the point in the show where, we reflect and we'll ask the following question, which is, our ability to change the world and make it a better place is determined by our willingness or ability to change first ourselves. So with that in mind, give us just one example of a thought or belief that you once felt strongly about and believe strongly, but no longer believe to be true.
This is a good question, and I do appreciate getting a little heads up for it because it would have been real hard on the spot. And you know what? When I was thinking about this, when I was thinking about it, but I probably actually would have said the same thing because I don't even have like a specific idea, but I think I have definitely within the last like 5 to 10 years really changed the way I look at challenging behavior from students. When I became a behavior analyst, ABA is a science. It's technical. It's straightforward. I love that it's a science. I love that it's evidence-based. I still believe in those, strategies, but there's more to that. And I think the kind of potential negative thing about ABA as a whole field, we get a bad rap for being cold, being like, we don't play well with others. We don't collaborate. And I agree with a lot of that stuff. And I think I've really shifted, how I view and how I respond to challenging behaviors with looking kind of not only at, okay, this is the function of the behavior and that's it. Well, what else can we look at? Like, I think there's so much that, we as clinicians within my field can learn from other modalities. We can learn from occupational therapy and from psychology. And there's so much great research now on what trauma does to the brain. And we have to be taking that into account when we're working with these kids who most likely have a history of trauma. Let's be real. Taking all of that into account when approaching that child and really working collaboratively with the teams that we're in, not just being like, oh, sure, you do your OT thing, I'll do my thing. And so instead, having this more holistic approach and it being okay to like sometimes go against what the science says. Like I do that as a parent all the time. I'm like, I know I'm reinforcing this behavior, like, because it's just always in my head. But you know what? I'm tired. I'm just going to give you the juice box that you asked for 45 times. And now you're screaming. And I'm just going to give it to you. And I know I'm reinforcing the screaming, but I don't care. Like, and that's okay. And that's okay when, teachers do that and parents of students do that. And like, there's just competing contingencies and you have to like see all of that and like the whole context, the whole child. And I think that's changed quite a bit from like me being green out of, grad school and being like, this is what you have to do. And that's it, that things aren't so, cut and dry like that.
Aren't black and white, aren't, rigid.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, this has been fascinating. I am again grateful that you and your organization are out there doing such great things for our community. Really, thank you for taking the time to spend with us. We've put the website up on, and we do it again. It is theautismhelper.com for those who are listening on podcasts, and it's up on the screen. Reach out, take a look, and see what Sasha and her team are doing. And if you're an educator, if you know an educator, somebody who's looking for some support or resources, please reach out to the Autism Helper and get Sasha one of those 25 speaking engagements, because she's going to be add so much value. So I'll say this as we get ready to wrap up. Thank you, first of all, for being here and being such an amazing warrior for our community. We're grateful. I always say that at the end of every episode, I remind people that now more than ever, empathy and love is so important. Empathy, understanding what somebody else is going through. Actually, you don't have to understand, just have some empathy. You don't know what another person is going through. So before you make a judgment, have some empathy. You don't know that the child hasn't asked their mother for a juice box 45 times before that moment, right? So have some empathy. And if you look at the world through the lenses of love, the world's just a better place. Choose love first. It just makes all the difference in the world. We have so many things going on in our society. We're being bombarded constantly with things that create divisiveness and separation, and it should be the things that bind us together, and love is one of those. So love each other. And with that, I'm going to throw it. Thank you, Joe, by the way, for jumping on, and Auntie Pua, and Sean Hall, and to Billy Footwear, which I'm sure that Sean will do. Thank you, everybody, for catching us on Facebook and on our YouTube channel and in podcasts and our Family Down WSTX AM Radio. Thank you all for participating, and we'll throw it to Sean to sign us out. And thank you again, Sasha, for an amazing conversation today.
I want to thank you. Thanks, Sasha, again for her time. And that question that I asked, try and ask yourself that question as often as possible. We can never tire of the effort to raise our consciousness, which is, putting ourselves in somebody else's shoes, being more childlike and less childish. Questions are so much more valuable than statements. We never know what another person's perspective is. We also want to make sure that we encourage you to register for the men's group that we are launching as well. At this point, we think that our first gathering is going to take place in April. We were thinking it would be in March, and Brian and I were part of a men's group within the financial services firm that we belong to, and from what we got from that experience, we realized society doesn't encourage men to be free with their fears and things of that sort. So why not create a safe place? And we'll be meeting online once a month, virtually, at least to begin with. The registration link is on the screen wherever you're catching us. And again, Sasha, thank you for such a great time today. Thank you for everyone for tuning in, and everyone within the sound of my voice. We love you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so